Dr. Marcus Reed pressed his face to the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Dream, watching Sylvana Prime emerge from the cosmic darkness like a jewel carved from starlight itself. The planet's surface gleamed with crystalline formations that caught and refracted the light of its binary suns, creating aurora patterns that painted the atmosphere in colors that had no names in human language. Magnificent, he whispered, his xenobiologist's training warring with simple human awe at the beauty spread before them. "First time seeing a Sylvanian world?" asked Ambassador Chen, joining him at the observation deck. "The pictures in our cultural briefings don't do it justice." Marcus nodded, unable to tear his gaze away from the approaching planet. After 18 months of careful negotiations, the Sylvanian Empire had finally agreed to this cultural exchange, the first time in their recorded history that they had permitted outsiders to visit their homeworld. As the mission's chief xenobiologist, Marcus was responsible for documenting Sylvanian biology and social structures, but his academic curiosity was overshadowed by the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Nervous?" Ambassador Chen asked, noting the tension in Marcus's posture. "Fascinated," Marcus corrected. "The Sylvanians have been isolationists for over 3 centuries. Their decision to open diplomatic contact suggests either desperation or unprecedented confidence in their ability to control the interaction." The Harmony's Dream received landing coordinates that guided them toward a spaceport that seemed to grow from the planet's surface like a natural formation. As they descended through Sylvana Prime's atmosphere, Marcus caught glimpses of cities that blended architecture with living crystal, transportation networks that flowed like rivers of light, and agricultural systems that appeared to function through symbiosis rather than cultivation. "Welcome to Sylvana Prime," came the transmission from planetary control, the voice carrying musical harmonics that made human speech sound flat by comparison. "Diplomatic protocols are in effect. Please maintain formation and follow guidance to the designated reception facility." The landing process was smoother than Marcus had expected, bringing them to rest in a crystalline chamber that seemed to exist for the sole purpose of protecting visiting vessels. As the diplomatic team prepared for their first face-to-face encounter with Sylvanian leadership, Marcus reviewed his notes on what little was known about their hosts. The Sylvanians were described as humanoid but ethereal, with physical characteristics that seemed to blur the line between organic and crystalline life forms. Their technology was reportedly centuries ahead of human achievement, while their art and culture emphasized harmony between consciousness and environment in ways that human philosophers could barely comprehend. "Remember," Ambassador Chen addressed the team as they prepared to disembark, "this is first contact from their perspective as much as ours. They've been observing human civilization for decades, but direct interaction is unprecedented. Every gesture, every word, every expression will be analyzed for cultural significance." The airlock cycled open to reveal a reception chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The walls seemed to be grown rather than built, composed of living crystal that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. The air itself carried a subtle resonance that made breathing feel like participating in some vast, slow symphony. But it was the Sylvanian delegation that truly captured Marcus's attention. They moved with fluid grace that made human motion seem clumsy by comparison, their forms tall and elegant in ways that suggested evolutionary pressures entirely different from those that had shaped humanity. Their skin had a subtle translucent quality that seemed to capture and refract ambient light, while their elongated ears tapered to points adorned with jewelry that appeared to be made from crystallized sound itself. At the center of the delegation stood a figure whose presence commanded attention through sheer force of natural authority. Queen Lireleth wore robes that seemed woven from captured starlight, while a crown of living crystal rested on her brow like a constellation made manifest. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus's heart, large, luminous, and filled with an intelligence that seemed to perceive dimensions of reality beyond human comprehension. "Welcome to Sylvana Prime," Queen Lireleth said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the crystal chamber like music made audible. "I am Queen Lireleth of the Silver Court, keeper of the Crystal Throne, guardian of the harmony between worlds." Ambassador Chen stepped forward to deliver the formal greeting that had been practiced and refined through months of preparation, but Marcus found himself unable to focus on the diplomatic protocols. His attention remained fixed on Queen Lireleth, studying the way light seemed to flow across her translucent skin, the elegant precision of her movements, the subtle expressions that suggested depths of thought and feeling that he could barely begin to interpret. Dr. Marcus Reed, Ambassador Chen was saying, our chief xenobiologist and cultural observer. Marcus managed a bow that he hoped approximated appropriate respect, but when he straightened and met Queen Lyriletha's gaze directly, he felt something electric pass between them. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, showing what might have been surprise at his obvious fascination rather than the diplomatic wariness she had probably expected. Dr. Reed, she said, his name taking on musical qualities when spoken with Sylvanian phonetics. Your research into interspecies biology precedes you. I understand you have made significant contributions to understanding the diversity of conscious life forms across the galaxy. Your Majesty honors me, Marcus replied, surprised by how steady his voice sounded despite the way his pulse was racing. But I suspect my understanding of biological diversity is about to be revolutionized by what I learn here. Queen Lyriletha's smile was subtle but genuine, suggesting appreciation for his honest acknowledgement of ignorance rather than false claims of expertise. Knowledge shared freely becomes wisdom gained mutually. We have much to learn from each other, Dr. Reed. As the formal reception continued with tours of the Crystalline Palace and presentations on Sylvanian culture, Marcus found himself stealing glances at Queen Lyrileth whenever diplomatic protocol allowed. She moved through her duties with natural grace, explaining Sylvanian achievements with obvious pride while maintaining the careful courtesy appropriate to first contact situations. But Marcus began to notice something beneath her composed exterior, moments of self-consciousness when human attention lingered on her appearance, subtle signs of discomfort when cultural differences became apparent, and a careful distance that seemed more personal than diplomatic. The crystalline matrices in our architecture, Queen Lyrileth was explaining to the assembled diplomats, gesturing toward walls that pulsed with inner light, grow according to mathematical principles that reflect the underlying harmony of natural forces. What you might consider decoration serves functional purposes in regulating temperature, acoustics, and psychic resonance. Psychic resonance? Marcus asked, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. The relationship between consciousness and environment, Queen Lyrileth replied, though her expression suggested this was a complex topic not easily reduced to simple explanation. Sylvanian biology includes sensory capabilities that perceive electromagnetic and quantum fluctuations produced by thinking minds. Our architecture amplifies and harmonizes these emanations. Marcus felt his understanding of Sylvanian civilization shift as the implications of her words sank in. They didn't just live in harmony with their environment, they had developed technology that created literal harmony between individual consciousness and collective experience. Remarkable, he said softly, and something in his tone of genuine awe made Queen Lyrileth look at him with increased attention. You find our differences interesting rather than disturbing, she asked, and Marcus caught an undercurrent of vulnerability in her musical voice that suggested the question carried personal significance beyond mere diplomatic courtesy. Fascinating, Marcus replied firmly. Beauty takes countless forms across the galaxy, Your Majesty. Sylvanian achievements represent elegance and sophistication that surpasses human accomplishments by orders of magnitude. Queen Lyriletha's luminous eyes studied his face with careful attention, as though searching for signs of diplomatic flattery rather than genuine appreciation. When she found only honest admiration in his expression, her own demeanor shifted subtly, the careful distance softening into something that might have been cautious interest. As the day's formal presentations concluded and the human delegation was escorted to their guest quarters, Marcus realized that his mission had become far more complex than simple biological observation. Queen Lyrileth had captured his imagination in ways that transcended scientific curiosity, while her apparent insecurity about human perceptions of Sylvanian appearance suggested emotional depths that made her even more intriguing. The next few days would determine whether the cultural barriers between their species could be bridged through understanding, or whether the differences that made each civilization unique would prove insurmountable obstacles to meaningful connection. But as Marcus settled into quarters that seemed grown from living light itself, he couldn't shake the memory of Queen Lyriletha's luminous eyes and the way her smile had transformed her ethereal features into something that approached the divine. Some encounters, he reflected, changed not just academic understanding but the very foundations of what the heart recognized as beautiful. The cultural exchange program unfolded with careful precision over the following days, each event choreographed to showcase Sylvanian achievements while respecting the diplomatic delicacy of first contact. Marcus found himself immersed in wonders that challenged every assumption he'd held about the relationship between technology and nature, consciousness and environment, individual achievement and collective harmony. In the morning, Queen Lireleth personally guided tours through research facilities where Sylvanian scientists grew computers from crystalline matrices that thought in harmonics rather than binary code. Their laboratories felt more like gardens than sterile workspaces, with equipment that seemed to bloom from the floors and walls in response to researchers' needs. Your people's approach to technology is remarkable, Marcus observed as they watched Sylvanian biologists coax healing accelerants from modified plant structures. The integration between organic and inorganic systems surpasses anything in human scientific achievement. Integration is the foundation of Sylvanian philosophy, Queen Lireleth replied, her musical voice carrying undertones of pride mixed with something that might have been defensive uncertainty. We believe that consciousness and environment should enhance each other rather than existing in opposition. Marcus noted the way she watched him during these explanations, her luminous eyes studying his reactions with careful attention. There was something almost vulnerable in her manner, as though she expected criticism or rejection of Sylvanian methods from the human perspective. The harmony you've achieved is extraordinary, he said, meaning every word. Human technology tends toward domination of natural forces rather than cooperation with them. What you've accomplished here represents evolution in thinking that we're only beginning to understand. Queen Lireleth's translucent skin seemed to glow slightly brighter at his praise, though Marcus wasn't certain whether this was conscious expression or involuntary biological response. Her elongated ears twitched almost imperceptibly, a gesture he was learning to recognize as indicating either pleasure or nervousness. In the afternoons, they visited art galleries where Sylvanian creators had shaped light itself into sculptures that told stories across multiple sensory dimensions. The works were beautiful beyond human comprehension, incorporating visual, auditory, and psychic elements that created experiences rather than mere observations. Does human art achieve similar multidimensional expression? Queen Lireleth asked as they stood before a light sculpture that seemed to sing in colors that had no names. Not like this, Marcus admitted honestly. Human art tends to focus on individual senses rather than creating integrated experiences. What you've achieved here represents artistic evolution that we're probably centuries from approaching. Again, he noticed Queen Lireleth's careful observation of his response, as though she expected disappointment or criticism rather than the genuine awe he was expressing. Her manner suggested someone who had been led to believe that Sylvanian achievements would be somehow inadequate when measured against human standards. The evenings brought historical presentations in amphitheaters that grew from living crystal, where Sylvanian scholars shared their civilization's development through interactive chronicles that allowed observers to experience key moments in their species' evolution. Marcus watched the rise of Sylvanian culture with fascination, noting the way their society had developed cooperation and harmony as central values rather than the competition and conflict that had shaped much of human history. Your people chose a different path than humanity, he commented to Queen Lireleth as they walked through palace corridors that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. The emphasis on collective harmony rather than individual achievement has created something remarkable. Different, yes, Queen Lireleth replied, but her tone carried undertones of uncertainty that surprised Marcus. Perhaps too different. We have often wondered whether our development diverged so far from galactic norms that meaningful interaction with other species would prove impossible. Marcus stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Your Majesty, why would you consider your achievements inadequate? Everything I've seen here represents sophistication and beauty that surpasses human accomplishments in every measurable way. Queen Lireleth's luminous eyes met his with an expression of surprise that seemed genuine. You truly find our ways acceptable. Not primitive or unsettling. The question revealed depths of insecurity that Marcus hadn't suspected. Queen Lireleth, for all her obvious intelligence and natural authority, seemed to harbor genuine anxiety about how Sylvanian civilization would be perceived by outsiders. Acceptable? Marcus repeated, incredulous. Your Majesty, what I've witnessed here is extraordinary. The integration of technology and nature, the emphasis on harmony over dominance, the artistic achievements that transcend human sensory limitations, these represent evolutionary advances that most species would consider miraculous. Queen Lireleth studied his face with the intensity of someone searching for signs of diplomatic deception rather than genuine opinion. When she found only honest admiration in his expression, her demeanor shifted subtly, the careful distance that had characterized their interactions giving way to something approaching personal interest. You are different from what our cultural analyses suggested about human perspectives, she said carefully. Our studies of human civilization indicated preferences for aesthetic and social structures more similar to your own species' characteristics. Marcus began to understand the source of her uncertainty. Your Majesty, human appreciation for beauty and achievement isn't limited to human-like characteristics. Our greatest artists, scientists, and philosophers have always been inspired by diversity rather than similarity. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Queen Lireleth's chief advisor, a distinguished Sylvanian whose crystalline jewelry marked him as high-ranking nobility. He spoke to the queen in their musical language, but Marcus caught enough of the exchange to understand that official duties required her attention. Dr. Reed, Queen Lireleth said as her advisor departed, I have enjoyed our conversations more than protocol typically allows. Would you be available for a private discussion tomorrow evening? There are aspects of Sylvanian culture that might be better explored without the constraints of formal diplomatic presentations. Marcus felt his pulse quicken at the invitation, recognizing both the professional opportunity and the personal significance of Queen Lireleth requesting private time with him. I would be honored, Your Majesty. Excellent. My personal chambers include an observatory that offers spectacular views of our moon system. Perhaps we might discuss the relationship between Sylvanian astronomical achievements and our cultural development. As Queen Lireleth departed to attend to royal duties, Marcus found himself anticipating the following evening with excitement that went far beyond academic curiosity. Their conversations had revealed not just the sophistication of Sylvanian civilization, but the complex personality of their remarkable queen. Someone who commanded respect through intelligence and grace while harboring unexpected vulnerabilities about her people's place in the broader galaxy. That night, as Marcus reviewed his notes in quarters that seemed to adjust their crystalline walls to his emotional state, he reflected on how completely Queen Lireleth had captured his imagination. Her ethereal beauty was undeniable, but it was her mind that truly fascinated him, the way she thought about problems, the depth of her concern for her people's welfare, the curiosity that survived despite the burdens of leadership. Tomorrow's private conversation would determine whether the connection he sensed building between them was mutual recognition or simply his own response to encountering someone whose intelligence and grace transcended every boundary that typically separated different forms of consciousness. Either way, Marcus realized, his understanding of beauty would never be the same after encountering Queen Lireleth and the extraordinary civilization she represented. Some experiences, he was learning, changed not just intellectual perspective but the very foundations of what the heart recognized as worthy of wonder and appreciation. The Royal Observatory proved to be a crystalline dome that crowned the highest spire of Queen Lireleth's palace, its transparent walls offering unobstructed views of Sylvana Prime's night sky. Marcus arrived to find the space illuminated only by starlight and the gentle glow emanating from Queen Lireleth herself, her translucent skin capturing and refracting the cosmic radiance that streamed through the dome's crystal matrix. Dr. Reed, she greeted him, gesturing toward a viewing area where crystalline chairs had been arranged to take advantage of the spectacular celestial display. Welcome to my favorite retreat from the demands of leadership. Marcus settled into a chair that somehow adjusted itself to his human physiology while providing perfect views of the triple moon system that dominated Sylvana Prime's night sky. The sight was breathtaking, 3 celestial bodies in various phases of illumination, their combined light painting the observatory in silver and gold. This is magnificent, he said, meaning every word. The way the triple moon system creates those tidal light patterns across your planet's surface, it must influence everything from agriculture to architecture. Perceptive, Queen Lireleth replied, settling gracefully into the chair beside him. The lunar cycles govern much of Sylvanian life, from biological rhythms to artistic inspiration. Our ancestors learned to work with celestial patterns rather than despite them. As they discussed Sylvanian astronomical achievements and their cultural significance, Marcus noticed that Queen Lireleth seemed more relaxed than during their formal interactions. Away from the diplomatic protocols and official presentations, her natural personality emerged, intellectually curious, surprisingly playful, and deeply thoughtful about the responsibilities of leadership. Your people's integration of natural cycles into your technological development is remarkable, Marcus observed. Human civilization tends to isolate itself from environmental factors through artificial systems. What you've achieved represents harmony that we're only beginning to understand. Queen Lireleth's expression grew thoughtful at his words. You speak of our achievements with such appreciation, Dr. Reed. But surely human accomplishments in exploration, conflict resolution, and cultural diversity surpass what isolated Sylvanians have managed to develop. Marcus turned to study her face in the gentle moonlight, noting something in her tone that suggested this wasn't casual conversation but a deeper inquiry into comparative species development. Your Majesty, why do you consistently speak of Sylvanian achievements as though they're somehow insufficient? Everything I've observed here represents sophistication that exceeds human capabilities in virtually every measurable way. Queen Lireleth was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes fixed on the celestial display above them. When she finally spoke, her words carried vulnerability that surprised him with its honesty. Dr. Reed, Marcus, if I may, we have observed human civilization for decades through your cultural broadcasts, your artistic expressions, your technological demonstrations. The beauty of your species, the elegance of your forms, the dynamic nature of your social structures, they represent ideals that Sylvanian evolution never achieved. Marcus felt his understanding of their conversations shift as he began to comprehend the source of Queen Lireleth's persistent uncertainty. You've been comparing Sylvanian achievements to human standards. Human standards, and those of other species we've encountered through long-range observation. The graceful forms of the Etherians, the crystalline perfection of the Andromedans, the fierce beauty of the Centaurian warriors, all represent aesthetic ideals that Sylvanian biology never approached. The admission revealed depths of insecurity that Marcus had never suspected. Queen Lireleth, despite her obvious intelligence and natural authority, had internalized a belief that her people were somehow inadequate when measured against other species' characteristics. Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, has anyone ever told you that human cultural broadcasts don't represent objective standards of beauty or achievement? They're simply expressions of one species' particular evolutionary path. Queen Lireleth turned toward him, her expression showing surprise at his suggestion. But surely the consistency of aesthetic preferences across multiple species indicates universal standards for beauty, grace, and accomplishment. Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn by the opportunity to address misconceptions that had clearly shaped Queen Lireleth's worldview in fundamental ways. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, filled with forms of consciousness and beauty that transcend any single species' capacity to fully appreciate. What you consider inadequate about Sylvanian development, I see as evolutionary achievements that surpass human accomplishments in ways that leave me speechless with admiration. You cannot mean that, Queen Lireleth protested, though her voice carried hope alongside skepticism. Surely human aesthetic preferences are limited by human sensory capabilities and evolutionary history, Marcus interrupted gently. Your ability to perceive psychic harmonics, to create technology that enhances rather than dominates natural systems, to build civilization based on cooperation rather than competition, these represent advances that most species would consider miraculous. Queen Lireleth studied his face with the intensity of someone trying to determine whether his words carried genuine conviction or merely diplomatic courtesy. The moonlight streaming through the crystal dome caught the subtle luminescence of her skin, creating patterns of light that shifted with what Marcus was learning to recognize as emotional response. You truly find Sylvanian characteristics appealing rather than alien? She asked quietly. Appealing? Marcus repeated, incredulous. Your Majesty, you possess a beauty that transcends human understanding. The way light moves across your skin, the musical quality of your voice, the grace of your movements, these create aesthetic experiences that no human artist has ever approached. The words came out with more passion than Marcus had intended, revealing the depth of fascination that Queen Lireleth had inspired in him. Her eyes widened at his frank admission, showing surprise that seemed to illuminate her entire being. I had not. That is, our cultural analyses suggested that human preferences tended toward characteristics more similar to your own species, she said, her usual composed manner giving way to something approaching confusion. Some humans might prefer familiar characteristics, Marcus admitted. But many of us are drawn to beauty that challenges our preconceptions, that reveals new possibilities for what consciousness and intelligence can become. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both processing the implications of their exchange. Above them, Sylvana Prime's triple moons continued their celestial dance, casting shifting patterns of light across the observatory's crystal surfaces. Marcus, Queen Lireleth said finally, using his given name with an intimacy that made his heart race, may I ask you something that extends beyond diplomatic courtesy? Of course, Your Majesty. Do you find me personally appealing? Not as a representative of Sylvanian achievement, but as an individual being. The question hung between them like a bridge across the vast differences in their species, social positions, and responsibilities. Marcus met her luminous gaze directly, seeing in her expression a vulnerability that made her even more beautiful than the moonlight and crystalline setting that surrounded them. I find you extraordinary, he said simply. Not just beautiful, but fascinating in ways that make me want to understand everything about how you think, how you see the universe, how you've become someone who commands both respect and affection from your people. Queen Lireleth's smile was radiant with relief and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge aloud. Then perhaps our species are not as incompatible as I had feared. As they continued talking through the night, sharing perspectives on leadership, scientific curiosity, and the loneliness that came with responsibilities neither had chosen but both had embraced, Marcus realized that their connection represented more than diplomatic success or personal attraction. It symbolized the possibility that differences between species could become sources of wonder rather than barriers to understanding, and that beauty, like consciousness itself, took forms too diverse for any single perspective to fully comprehend. Outside the observatory, Sylvana Prime turned slowly through space, its crystalline cities glowing with bioluminescent harmony that connected individual consciousness to collective purpose. Inside the crystal dome, two beings from different worlds discovered that the greatest beauty often lay not in similarity, but in the courage to appreciate forms of grace that challenged every assumption about what was possible when hearts opened to infinite possibility. The following evening, Queen Lireleth met Marcus on the palace's highest terrace, a platform carved from living crystal that seemed to float among the stars themselves. She had come without her crown or ceremonial robes, wearing instead simple garments that revealed more of her natural translucent beauty. Under the light of Sylvana Prime's triple moons, her skin took on an otherworldly luminescence that left Marcus momentarily speechless. You came, she said, her musical voice carrying notes of surprise and relief. Wild cosmic forces couldn't have kept me away, Marcus replied, moving to join her at the terrace's edge where the crystalline barrier offered unobstructed views of the planet's night landscape. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, both aware that this meeting represented a crossing of boundaries that their respective positions made complicated. Queen Lireleth was the absolute ruler of a galactic empire, while Marcus was a visiting scientist whose species had only recently achieved meaningful space travel. Yet beneath those vast differences in status and responsibility, they had discovered a connection that transcended every rational obstacle. Marcus, Queen Lireleth said finally, her voice so quiet it was barely audible above the gentle harmonics that emanated from the palace's crystalline structures. I must tell you something that I have never spoken aloud to anyone. She turned partially away from him, her posture suggesting vulnerability that made Marcus's heart ache with protective instincts he had no right to feel. I'm not as beautiful as humans. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, so unexpected and so fundamentally wrong that he found himself stepping closer without conscious decision. His gaze never wavered from her face, his expression showing the kind of awed appreciation that belonged to moments of encountering something beyond mortal comprehension. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "how can you possibly believe that?" Queen Lyriletha's luminous eyes met his with desperate honesty. "Because I have seen human beauty, Marcus. The perfection of your forms, the symmetry of your features, the dynamic grace of your movements. Compared to human aesthetic ideals, Sylvanian characteristics are alien, translucent, strange." Marcus felt his world tilt as he understood the depth of insecurity that Queen Lyrilleth had been carrying. This extraordinary being, brilliant, compassionate, powerful enough to command the loyalty of billions, had somehow internalized the belief that her ethereal beauty was somehow inadequate when measured against human standards. "Lyrilleth," he said, using her name without title for the first time, "you are the most beautiful being I have ever encountered. Not just physically, though your appearance takes my breath away every time I see you. But beautiful in ways that encompass everything you are, your intelligence, your grace, your concern for your people, your courage in opening your civilization to contact with strangers. You don't have to offer comfort through flattery," she said quietly, though her voice carried hope alongside resignation. "This isn't flattery," Marcus replied firmly, moving close enough that he could see the subtle patterns of bioluminescence that moved across her translucent skin like living constellations. "This is recognition of truth that goes beyond species preference or diplomatic courtesy." He gestured toward the crystalline city sprawling below them, its organic architecture glowing with harmonious light. "Look at what your people have built, Lyrilleth. Look at the beauty you've created not through domination of natural forces, but through cooperation with them. Your entire civilization reflects the same ethereal grace that makes you so extraordinary." Queen Lyrilleth studied his face with the intensity of someone trying to determine whether hope was justified or simply setting her up for greater disappointment. Human cultural broadcasts suggest aesthetic preferences that represent only one species' limited perspective, Marcus interrupted. "Lyrilleth, I've spent my career studying consciousness across the galaxy, and I can tell you that beauty takes infinite forms. What you call alien, I call transcendent. What you consider strange, I find absolutely captivating." He stepped closer still, close enough that the subtle harmonics emanating from her crystalline jewelry created music in the space between them. "Your translucent skin doesn't make you less beautiful than humans. It makes you luminous in ways that human beauty could never achieve. The way light moves through you, the way your emotions create patterns of bioluminescence, the ethereal grace of your movements, these represent evolutionary achievements that surpass anything my species has accomplished." Queen Lyriletha's eyes searched his face with desperate hope. "You truly see me that way? Not as a curiosity or diplomatic necessity, but as the most extraordinary being I've ever encountered," Marcus finished without hesitation. "Lyrilleth, the first moment I saw you, I forgot how to breathe. Every conversation we've shared has revealed new depths of intelligence and compassion that make you more fascinating. Your beauty isn't diminished by differences from human characteristics, it's magnified by qualities that no human could ever possess." Tears began to gather in Queen Lyriletha's luminous eyes, but they seemed to glow with inner light rather than falling like human tears. "For so long, I believed that isolation was necessary because we could never be accepted as we are. That other species would find us too alien, too different to form meaningful connections." "Different, yes," Marcus agreed, reaching out to gently touch her face, marveling at the warmth and subtle texture of her translucent skin. "But different in ways that expand the definition of what beauty can be. Lyrilleth, you've changed my understanding of grace, intelligence, and attraction in ways that will stay with me for the rest of my life." She leaned into his touch, her bioluminescent patterns brightening with what he was learning to recognize as profound emotional response. "Marcus, I must tell you something else. The cultural exchange, the diplomatic mission, these were partially motivated by my own curiosity about whether connection across species barriers was possible. And what have you concluded? Queen Lyriletha's smile was radiant with joy and wonder. That some connections transcend every boundary the universe can create. That beauty, like consciousness itself, takes forms too diverse for any single perspective to fully comprehend. As they stood together under the alien stars, surrounded by the gentle music of crystalline architecture and the soft light of triple moons, both understood that their connection represented more than personal attraction. It symbolized the possibility that differences between species could become sources of wonder rather than barriers to understanding. What happens now? Marcus asked, acutely aware of the vast differences in their positions and responsibilities that made any future complicated. Now, Queen Lyrileth replied, her voice carrying determination alongside tenderness, we discover what two beings from different worlds can build together when they see beauty in each other's differences rather than obstacles to overcome. She turned to face the crystalline city below them, her luminous form creating patterns of reflected light against the terrace's crystal surfaces. Marcus, my people have spent centuries believing that our differences from galactic norms made us unsuited for meaningful contact with other species. Your presence here, your appreciation for what we've accomplished, your recognition of beauty and characteristics we thought were alien, these revelations will reshape how Sylvanians see themselves and their place in the galaxy. Marcus felt the weight of implications that extended far beyond personal connection. And for humanity, knowing that beauty and intelligence can take forms we never imagined will expand our understanding of what's possible when consciousness evolves along different paths. They stood in comfortable silence, both processing the magnitude of what they had discovered in each other. Queen Lyriletha's insecurities about Sylvanian beauty had given way to recognition of her own extraordinary qualities, while Marcus's appreciation for her had evolved from initial fascination to deep admiration that encompassed every aspect of her being. I need you to know, Marcus said finally, that regardless of what complications our different positions might create, meeting you has been the most significant experience of my life. You are unforgettable, Lyrileth. Not just beautiful, but remarkable in ways that transcend physical appearance. And you, she replied, her luminous eyes reflecting starlight and infinite possibility, have shown me that beauty isn't about conforming to external standards, but about having the courage to be authentically oneself while remaining open to connections that surpass understanding. As the night deepened around them and Sylvana Prime's crystalline cities continued their gentle harmony of light and sound, Marcus and Queen Lyrileth stood together at the edge of infinite space, two souls who had found in each other proof that the universe's greatest wonders lay not in similarity, but in the courage to appreciate forms of grace that challenged every assumption about what was possible when hearts opened to beauty in all its magnificent diversity. The terrace crystals hummed with harmonic resonance that seemed to celebrate their recognition of each other, while above them the stars shone with the same distant beauty they had always possessed, but now Marcus understood that among those points of light were worlds where beings learned that true beauty lay not in meeting familiar standards, but in expanding the very definition of what could inspire wonder and love across the vast darkness between stars. In Queen Lyriletha's smile, in the gentle music of her voice, in the ethereal grace that made her movements seem like dance, Marcus had discovered beauty that was indeed beyond human, and infinitely more precious because of it.